before we go on, are you wanting your hair to come down like this?
Yeah, it's very modern.
It is? You're the one to say. Okay. I was just, it looks okay in the monitor. Just wanted to know.
What a considerate gesture.
How many times do you think you've played Rebel Rebel live?
Let me see. I've done something like 15 tours, I think. But that is one that I've always done, I think, in every show. And each tour is usually about 80 to 100 cities. So you work it out. What would that be?
Well, let's see.
1080 is 800.
80 times 15.
Is 1,200, something like 1,200 times.
Yeah, about 1,200 times.
Yeah.
So, do you get pumped up for it on this tour?
Oh, every night. You've picked on the one song that I find the most difficult to do in the entire show. It was written for an age when I was at a particular age, and it's just like, I know it's kind of, it can be an exciting song, but it's very, the lyrics I find it's just too much back in my past. Yeah. Whereas something like Rock and Roll Suicide, which should be back in my past, feels quite pertinent now.
When you're running through the catalog of songs now, are you hopping from character to character? Are you singing it?
No, as much as I feel that I am able in front of that many thousand people, I'm trying to just project the songs and do them in a lively way, but with no characterization. I mean, frankly, for me, the characterization thing stopped in 1976, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, there were no new characters after that. But I think that the idea that I would be performing as me was sort of, I don't think it was well received. I think people liked the idea of me becoming all these different characters, but it wasn't doing me as a person any good. So it was really, selfishly, I mean, I've done a lot of things selfishly. And one of them is to dispose of all the characters, try and find myself as a performer. Another one is that I'm starting very much, especially over the last 2 or 3 years, to write for me as opposed to a public. And all those things are for my own preservation of my own sanity and what I want to be as an artist. I can't work for audiences very well. I found that out in the early part of the 80s. It's not my forte, and it's not something I wish to do. I can't sort of do that. I'm happier when I'm writing and working truly for myself. And then if I've got a public who wants to come along and see it, that's great. But I never, up until 1983, I never expected one. And then I was told to expect one, and I don't think that's a great thing, because then you think, oh, maybe I should write in a different way for this kind of public, you know, and that's a bad thing to do.
You're pulling some older songs from way back out. How are those going over?
Absolute dynamite. Things like Suffragette City and Ziggy. They're getting the same kind of response that they got when I first did them, you know. It's like really weird. It's really odd. And by young people as well. I mean, I don't know whether they listen to their older brothers or their mothers and fathers' albums, I guess, some of the albums. But they certainly know them word for word, which is kind of encouraging. That's kind of nice.
Are you doing anything that people... Are you getting into people just stirring that they've never heard before? Well,
I guess there are 2 or 3 things that I put in for my own reasons, because I like them. Things like Moon of Alabama, which is a Bertolt Brecht Weill song that I used to do in the late 70s. That one's kind of, it goes down very strangely with the audiences, because it's a very odd piece of work.
Are you doing Queen Bitch?
Yeah, I do Queen Bitch. We alternate a lot. We've got enough numbers that we've rehearsed for the show that we feel that we can just change from night to night so that we don't get bored either, because you've really got to watch that on the tour.
What songs are the least boring or the most exciting?
Station to Station is always good. I always love that one. Also like Heroes, but I always liked Heroes. And this new one that Adrian Blues, I wrote for Adrian for his next album called Pretty Pink Rose. It's a plug aid, all right? Good song, great artist.
I hope to grab him for 5 minutes, actually, later. I'd like to put him up. Are you doing any material that's not yours?
Only the Bertolt Brecht piece. Everything else is mine. As far as the music goes, I wanted Adrian very much to work with me on this. Of all the guitar players that I've worked with, he's probably the most off-the-wall guitar player. And I thought he would inject old material with a new kind of life, so it didn't become stagnant and just like the record and all that.
How many piece band is it now?
4.
It's a 4-piece. So just talk about it. I mean,
5 with me, because I'm a musician too, you know.
Yeah. And when I ask you about
yeah, I want to ask you about that.
How's the sax doing?
It's all right. I'm having a guess. I just went and flooded the whole Tin Machine album with. I've got so up about my being allowed to play again. Well, I didn't want to, and Adrian said, "Why don't you all play that saxophone again?" And I said, "Well, you know, it's got dust on it. The pads have rotted." And he said, "But no, you do it on TV, C15. You should, you know." So I dragged it out for that. And I got so enthusiastic about it that the other week I went into the studio with Reeves Gabrels from Tin Machine, and I just put sax on all the tracks and obliterated all his guitar work. And I'm sure it'll be missing by the time it comes out. But I'm quite excited about getting involved in doing something like that again.
So, I mean, Adrian is taking this work. You've recorded these albums with a lot of different configurations of band, and now it's basically, what, is it a rock and roll context? Is it a...
Yeah, what we tried to do was strip down the, probably the larger, overproduced pieces of work, or orchestrated pieces of work and all that, and we've just rewritten them for a 4-piece band. So I guess what you get is a far more muscular approach to the songs. And the very basic elements of them, so it's really very tight and a small group sound. I mean, Changes, which was quite, it was with strings and everything on the original record, is now, it sounds like almost like a Beatles song, that real tight kind of harmony parts and riff and whatever. It's nice.
Are you ever going to do another Pinups type?
It's occurred to me. That was almost a stopgap when I did that. I was trying to evaluate what I wanted to do, and that was almost a fill-in thing, because I was determined to do 2 albums a year in those days, which is what I was doing. So I really took on a lot, but not really. No, I've assembled 2 or 3 things like that, but I can't really see it in the future.
If you were to, are there any songs you have in mind, some really weird or unusual selections you'd like to go out and cover?
Nah, well, even if I could think of them, I'm not telling you, because I do have some kind of quite original ideas, but they're going to remain original.
Okay.
Oh, I tell you one I always love to do, and nobody else would bother doing this one, I'm sure. It Can't Happen Here by the Mothers of Invention, which was a wonderful piece of work.
So I was reading the interview when I flew down,
Yeah.
Interview magazine.
Yeah.
And you were saying a fair bit about not liking much of the videos that are appearing on MTV, and I'm wondering, is there any stuff out there that you do like?
I think, well, let me qualify that. I think I don't like it primarily because it's overkill. I've seen too much. I think when it was a hard-to-come-by medium, I think it had a lot more impact. I think even the greatest idea in the world now tends to go straight over your head because you're acclimatized so much to having seen the use of fragmented images with music. When you first hear, it's like a song. When you first hear one song, it can change your life, but when you've heard that song 100,000 times, it no longer changes anything in your life. And I think that happens with everything. I think the idea of fragmented images is now so much part of our vocabulary that it is no longer a surprise. And I like being surprised, and I'm not being surprised anymore because I am numbed.
I'd like to ask something. We were talking about guitars. There are 2 people who I'm doing a couple guitar pieces on the side. If you could recount for me any of the stuff when you were working with Jeff Beck.
Yeah. Oh, how awful. I only know 2 funny stories about Jeff, and I promised him I'd never tell him, so I'm not going to.
Then don't tell him. You want to talk about it as we
They're very funny. Jeff, I think, is well, Jeff was the first major influence. When I got interested in doing primarily a hard rock band, because I played around with all kinds of ideas before then, but when the Spiders actually assembled, both Ronson and I were devout Beck fans. I mean, he really was the best. I'd seen him first play at... That's a nice little story. It's a little one. I seen him first play at a place called Eel Pie Island in just outside of London, which was a sort of a real home for rhythm and blues. And he'd just taken over from the Yardbirds, I think. The Yardbirds had gone big, and so there was the new band up there, the house band, and it was Jeff Beck's. It was called the Tridents, just a 3-piece band. And the guy nobody had seen anybody playing like him. He had such an authority. And it sounded not quite right, because he was playing things that the blues players, because most guitar players in England at that time were aping the American blues players, so it was note for note exactly solos that you could hear off albums by Muddy Waters or whatever, and B.B. King. But he had something different. He was putting his own inventions into the playing. It was really a truly sort of a homegrown style, and I just feel he's just dynamite.
Do you get nervous before you go on?
Absolutely, every time, yeah. Yeah, about 5 minutes. It used to be a lot longer, but now it's just like 5 minutes before.
What do you worry about?
Remembering what I can't remember my words. I never have been able to. So I always think I'm going to forget everything. I always get that nightmare that I go on stage and I haven't learnt a word, and I'm just stuck out there and all this music's playing and I've got no ideas. What did I write? I can't remember a word of it. That's my most frequent nightmare.
I've heard stories from some singers that they said they'll forget the words, but everyone is singing along. In the
yeah, oh, that's a godsend, yeah, because you just read the lips. Yeah, en masse. Read my lips, 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 lips.